Now we figure out what the hell we're going to do, Alina says, her smile fading as the transmission ends. She turns to her senior staff, seeing a mixture of amusement and concern on their faces. Lieutenant Commander Rashid, the tactical officer, clears his throat. Captain, preliminary scans showed 27 hegemony vessels in formation around us. Their weapons signatures are substantial. Let's not panic just yet, Alina replies, tapping her console to bring up a holographic display of the alien fleet. Dr. Lai, what can you tell me about their technology based on these readings? Dr. Wei Lui, the Audacity's chief science officer, studies the data with narrowed eyes. Her fingers dance across her tablet, comparing the alien readings with Earth's database. Fascinating. Their energy output is massive, at least 30 times our maximum capacity. But what? Alina prompts. The configuration is inefficient. They're generating enormous power but wasting nearly 60% of it on what appears to be ceremonial lighting and artificial gravity far stronger than necessary. Lai looks up, a spark of hope in her eyes. It's like comparing a chandelier to a laser pointer. Communications Officer Jamal Nkosi has been quietly analyzing the transmission. Captain, I've been studying their language patterns. Their translator is advanced, but there are inconsistencies. They have 17 different honorifics for addressing superiors, but their vocabulary lacks terms for negotiation between equals. Their entire communication system presupposes dominance hierarchies. Alina paces the bridge, her mind racing. The Audacity wasn't designed for combat. None of Earth's first 5 deep space vessels were. They were exploration ships, built from repurposed components after Earth's resource wars had left their civilization struggling to recover. Navigator Jackson, how quickly can we return to Earth if needed? She asks. Darius Jackson, a former racing pilot with more intuition than formal training, checks his calculations. At maximum safe speed, 3 weeks. At emergency burn risking drive collapse, maybe 10 days. But Captain, their ships would overtake us within hours. Alina nods thoughtfully. So running isn't an option. We could surrender, suggests Lieutenant Park from the Environmental Systems Station, not looking up from her console. Live to fight another day. That's assuming they'd let us live, Rashid counters darkly. Alina stops pacing and stares at the alien flagship displayed on the main viewer. It's beautiful in an ostentatious way, all gleaming surfaces and pulsing lights, like a floating palace. You know what this reminds me of? The royal barges European monarchs used to parade around in. All show, minimal functionality. Dr. Wong, the ship's engineer who had been quietly listening from his station, suddenly perks up. Captain, I need 2 hours in the lab with this sensor data. There's something about their shield configuration that looks peculiar. You've got 1 hour, Alina tells him. Meanwhile, let's prepare 3 options: diplomatic resolution, tactical response, and, she smiles slightly, something unpredictable. As her crew disperses to their assignments, Alina remains on the bridge, studying the alien vessels. She opens a private channel to the 4 other human ships in their small expedition. Captains, this is Reyes. We've bought ourselves some time, but we need to coordinate. The hegemony expects us to either flee, fight, or submit. I propose we do none of these things. Captain Johansson of the Defiance responds first. What exactly did you have in mind, Alina? Something they've never seen before, she replies, a plan already forming. I think it's time we showed the galaxy that humans don't follow anyone's script but our own. As the Audacity maintains its position, Alina reviews Earth's history of asymmetric warfare and diplomatic surprises. Throughout human civilization, smaller, less advanced forces had occasionally triumphed against overwhelming odds through creativity and unexpected approaches. Admiral Zolthar expects us to react with fear, she murmurs to herself. But what happens when you encounter a species that responds to threats with curiosity instead? I'm saying they have no idea what they're dealing with, Marcus replies, his eyes gleaming with mischief. And I have a plan that's either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. Alina leans forward, intrigued. I'm listening. Marcus projects a detailed schematic of the Hegemony flagship's shield configuration. Their defensive systems are built on principles they've used for millennia. Perfect against energy weapons, nearly impenetrable to conventional attacks. But he highlights a specific frequency pattern. They've never encountered our particular approach to FTL technology. The Alcubierre-Morrison drive. Alina nods. But that's for propulsion, not combat. Exactly. Marcus exclaims, his excitement building. The way our drive compresses space-time creates ripples, what we considered an unfortunate side effect. Remember those early test flights? How the bubbles would destabilize nearby sensor equipment. Lieutenant Chen's eyes widen with understanding. You're suggesting we could temporarily blind their systems. Better than that, Marcus says, adjusting the simulation. A synchronized compression event from all 5 of our ships could create a cascading distortion that would pass harmlessly through their shields. They are not calibrated for space-time anomalies. Their sensors would register it as background radiation. Dr. Patel, who has been analyzing the Hegemony's cultural database, adds her perspective. Their society values predictability above all else. Their military doctrines haven't substantially changed in over 4,000 years. They literally cannot conceive of an approach they haven't cataloged. Alina studies the simulation as it plays out, showing the ripple effect expanding through the alien formation. So we could move our ships right under their noses without them tracking us properly. For approximately 47 seconds, Marcus confirms. After that, their adaptive systems would likely compensate. That's not much time, Rashid observes skeptically. It's enough, says Navigator Jackson, who has been quiet until now. If we plot our courses precisely, factoring in the distortion effect itself, his fingers dance across his console, creating a complex flight path. We could position ourselves inside their formation before they can react. Alina considers this. And then what? We'd still be outgunned, but not outthought. Marcus says, look at their ship designs. Every aspect is built around ceremony and tradition. Even their weapon systems are arranged for aesthetic symmetry rather than tactical advantage. He pulls up historical images from Earth's military history. Remember how early airplane designers eventually realized that beauty and function weren't always aligned. How the most effective designs often looked ungainly but performed better. The Hegemony never had that revelation. They've been refining the same basic concepts for so long, they can't see their fundamental flaws. Alina studies the data, a slow smile spreading across her face. So you're saying our ships, these cobbled together, ugly, efficient vessels, might actually have advantages over their perfect, symmetrical cruisers. More than might, Marcus confirms. Their reaction time is hampered by chains of command that have 17 ceremonial verification steps. Their targeting systems prioritize honorable hits to enemy command centers rather than tactical weak points. And most importantly, he brings up an engineering analysis. Their power distribution nodes are concentrated in aesthetically pleasing but strategically vulnerable patterns. So even if they recover from our initial maneuver, Alina begins. We'd still have options. Rashid finishes, his tactical mind already calculating possibilities. Alina stands, decision made. Dr. Wong, you have 24 hours to refine this plan and coordinate with the engineers on our sister ships. Lieutenant Chen, prepare a close-quarters tactical response for when we're inside their formation. Dr. Patel, I want you to craft a message that will thoroughly confuse their cultural expectations. As her crew disperses to their tasks, Alina remains in the conference room, studying the perfect, beautiful, fundamentally flawed design of the Hegemony vessels. She thinks about Earth's history, how necessity had stripped away ornamentation, how survival had demanded function over form, how humanity's greatest innovations had often come from its darkest moments. Admiral Zolfar, she murmurs to herself, You've spent millennia perfecting the wrong things. Their language doesn't even have words for bluff or feint. Their power has been unchallenged for so long that they've forgotten how to recognize threats. Dr. Paddle explains. Alina's expression hardens. Then I think it's time we reminded them that the universe is a dangerous place. Captain, Jamal Mkosi interjects. There's something else in their communication patterns that might prove useful. He brings up a linguistic analysis on the main display. The hegemony's formal protocols are incredibly rigid. They literally cannot begin offensive operations until completing a ceremonial declaration of intent to subjugate that requires the target's acknowledgement. Alina raises an eyebrow. You're saying as long as we keep them talking, they can't attack? Not exactly, Jamal clarifies, but their traditions demand a specific sequence of events. By introducing unexpected variables, we can force them to restart portions of their protocols, buying us more time. Alina nods, understanding. Dr. Lai Wei, who has been analyzing the biological data from their scans of the hegemony delegation, adds another perspective. Captain, their neurological responses show significant discomfort with interruptions and asymmetrical communications. When you laughed during the Admiral's formal greeting, his brain activity spiked in regions associated with confusion and distress. Cultural weapons, Alina muses. Interesting. Lieutenant Chen has been studying the tactical data from the hegemony fleet. Their ships maintain perfect formation at all times, even when it's tactically disadvantageous. It's like watching a parade rather than a combat-ready force. Alina brings together these observations, a plan forming. So we have several advantages they don't expect. Our drive technology can create space-time distortions their sensors aren't calibrated for. Their communication protocols are rigid and vulnerable to disruption. They experience neurological distress when faced with asymmetrical tactics, and their formations prioritize tradition over tactical advantage. Exactly, Dr. Wong confirms. We're not just technologically different, we're conceptually alien to them. They've evolved a society where innovation has been secondary to refinement for thousands of years. Alina accesses her console, bringing up Earth's historical military database. This reminds me of something. Here it is. During Earth's 20th century, a military theorist named John Boyd developed what he called the OUDA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. He proposed that fighters who could cycle through this process faster than their opponents gained a decisive advantage. She points to the hegemony ship schematics. Look at their command structure. Information flows through 17 verification levels before reaching decision makers. Their OUDA loop might take minutes, while ours takes seconds. We can get inside their decision cycle, Rashid says, understanding immediately. Act before they've even oriented to our previous move. Precisely. Alina nods. And I believe we can use their own rigid protocols against them. She turns to Communications Officer Mkosi. Jamal, prepare 3 different response formats to their next communication. One formal, one casual, and one completely nonsensical by their standards. We'll alternate between them randomly. To Dr. Lai Wei, analyze which of our behaviors triggered the strongest neurological responses and prepare to incorporate those into our diplomatic approach. To Security Chief Chen, Ava, identify the mathematical pattern in their fleet formation and calculate where they expect threats to come from. Then plot approaches from every other direction. Dr. Wong grins, comprehending the strategy. Cognitive warfare. We're not just planning to outfly them. We're going to confuse them into paralysis. Humans have rarely won conflicts through superior force, Alina says, pacing the conference room. We've survived by adapting faster than our challenges, by thinking differently. She stops, looking at the holographic display of the hegemony fleet. Admiral Zolthar expects submission or defiance. Both responses he understands. What he doesn't expect is for us to change the nature of the engagement entirely. Alina's communicator chimes with an incoming transmission. It seems our time for planning is up. The Admiral is calling. She straightens her uniform, a determined smile playing at her lips. Remember, everyone, be unpredictable. The hegemony has forgotten how to handle surprises. Let's give them several. How? Zolfar finally manages, his translator struggling to convey his tone. Elena smiles. That was just a taste of what humans can do when properly motivated. Now, shall we discuss a more equitable relationship? The Admiral's compound eyes shift through a spectrum of colors, his ceremonial armor plates flicking as he straightens to his full height. The silence stretches uncomfortably before he responds. Your demonstration violates 17 principles of proper space-time navigation, Zolfar states, his voice recalibrating mid-sentence. Hegemony records contain no precedent for such maneuvering. That's rather the point, Admiral. Elena replies calmly. Humanity specializes in the unprecedented. Behind her, the bridge crew of the Audacity maintains their positions, monitoring the status of the other 4 human vessels now scattered strategically throughout the hegemony formation. Navigator Jackson's display shows their precise coordinates, each position near critical nodes in the alien fleet's defense network, positions that, according to hegemony tactical doctrine, should be impossible to reach. You have disrupted the ceremonial confrontation sequence. The different alien voice interjects. The holoprojector shows a new figure, Counselor Vorth of the Regulatory Directorate, according to Dr. Patel's quick whisper to Elena. This violates protocol and invalidates the encounter. Elena exchanges a subtle glance with Jamal and Cozy. Their strategy is working. The hegemony leadership is now debating procedure instead of simply attacking. We sincerely apologize for any procedural confusion, Elena responds, adopting the formal tones Jamal had prepared. Perhaps your magnificence could enlighten us regarding the proper protocols for first contact between civilizations of mutual respect and admiration. The deliberately mixed honorifics and concepts, magnificence, paired with mutual respect, represent contradictory status indicators in hegemony communication. The alien counselor's breathing apparatus hisses sharply, their equivalent of aghast. There is no such protocol. Admiral Zolfar states flatly. All emergent species enter the hegemony through the vassal integration process. Yet here we are. Elena spreads her hands in a gesture of peaceful openness that simultaneously signals Lieutenant Chen to activate the ship's defensive countermeasures, neither integrated nor vassals. Through her earpiece, Elena hears Dr. Wang's excited whisper. Captain, they're scanning us with increasing power, but they're focusing on all the wrong systems. They're trying to analyze our drive technology while completely ignoring our sensor array modifications. Elena maintains her diplomatic smile while processing this information. The hegemony's technological focus is as rigid as their protocols. They're looking for advancements along paths they understand, blind to innovations in unexpected directions. Admiral, Elena says carefully, perhaps we could establish a new protocol for this unprecedented situation. Earth has much to offer the hegemony through cooperation rather than subordination. On her command console, a message flashes from the Defiance *. Targeting arrays locked onto our position. Weapons powering up. Even now, you attempt to dictate terms, Zolfar responds, his translator conveying increased formality. A warning sign, according to Dr. Patel's analysis. The hegemony has maintained galactic stability for 12,000 years through adherence to established order. Your demonstration shows capability but lacks proper respect for tradition. Elena nods thoughtfully, then makes a subtle hand gesture. Across the 5 human vessels, prepared systems activate simultaneously. Tradition has its place, Admiral, she responds. But so does adaptation. At that moment, the human ships emit precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses, not powerful enough to damage hegemony systems, but perfectly tuned to create momentary fluctuations in their sensor calibrations. In the 3-second window this creates, the Audacity transmits data packets to key systems throughout the hegemony fleet. What are you doing? Zolfar demands as warning indicators flash across his command console. Sharing information, Alina replies simply, "We've taken the liberty of transmitting our analysis of upcoming stellar instabilities affecting 17 hegemony worlds over the next century. Your own data confirms our findings, though your predictive algorithms hadn't recognized the pattern yet." As the hegemony commanders scramble to verify this unexpected information, Alina adds, "We've also included our preliminary designs for adaptation strategies. Consider it a gesture of goodwill from one spacefaring civilization to another." The Admiral stares at the data now flowing across his displays, information that would have taken his analysts decades to compile, freely given by these confounding humans. "Your approach is unorthodox," he finally states. Alina's smile widens. "Admiral, you have no idea how unorthodox we can be." The crystalline being shifts subtly, colors rippling through its structure in what Alina recognizes as their equivalent of laughter. "Perhaps we do. But beware. Admiral Zolfar will not tolerate your disrespect. He will seek to reassert dominance through traditional means." Traditional means. The challenge of Caridian. It is inevitable. Light pulses deeply within Tixon's core, and no emergent species has ever survived it. Alina leans forward, intrigued. "Tell me more about this challenge." The crystalline being's facets realign slightly, focusing more light toward Alina. The Caridian Nebula lies 3 light hours from this position. It contains gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and microsingularities that reconfigure unpredictably. For 12 millennia, the hegemony has used it as the ultimate test of worthiness. A navigational challenge, Alina surmises. More than navigation, Tixon corrects. It tests adaptability, courage, and innovative thinking, qualities the hegemony once valued, but now merely performs as ritual. As if sensing her next question, the ancient being continues. "The Krixnar were the first to complete the challenge, 17,000 years ago. We taught the young races how to traverse the stars safely. Now we are consulted only as a formality, our counsel ignored if it contradicts tradition." Alina studies the crystalline being. Unlike the other hegemony representatives with their ornate attire and ceremonial implants, Tixon appears unadorned, naturally elegant. "You said no emergent species has ever survived the challenge. Yet you speak as if you expect us to approach it differently." "We have observed your kind from afar," Tixon responds, subtle light patterns suggesting amusement. "Humans adapt rapidly. Where most species develop gradually along predictable evolutionary paths, yours makes conceptual leaps. You ask why not, instead of why. A dangerous trait, but potentially valuable in these changing times." "Changing? You mean the stellar instabilities we detected?" Among other concerns, the crystalline being's structure dims slightly. The hegemony has maintained peace through stagnation. For millennia, this approach served the galaxy well. But the universe does not reward stagnation indefinitely. Dr. Patel, who has been quietly observing the exchange, speaks up. "You're saying the hegemony's stability is becoming a liability rather than a strength." "Precisely," Tixon confirms. "Even now, several council factions debate your fate. The Vorathi seek to study your technology. The Xiltar fear your unpredictability and demand your elimination. The Mrexian confluence wishes to isolate your system until you mature into predictability." "And the Krixnar?" Alina asks. Tixon pauses, light cycling through complex patterns. "We remember when the galaxy was younger, when adaptability meant survival. We see in humanity echoes of that necessary chaos." Alina processes this information, recognizing the political opportunity emerging. "So the Council is divided on how to handle us, and Admiral Zolfar will likely propose this challenge to resolve the dispute while saving face. The Admiral must maintain the appearance of hegemony invincibility," Tixon confirms. "The challenge allows him to either humble you into submission or eliminate you without appearing threatened." But if we were to succeed, impossible, by conventional assessment, Tixon states, the challenge has been calibrated over thousands of years to ensure new species demonstrate proper deference through honorable failure. Elena smiles slightly. Fortunately, humans have little regard for conventional assessment. The crystalline beam's structure brightens appreciably. Indeed, which is why I have shared certain navigational insights about the nebula with your science officer during our previous exchanges. Elena glances toward Dr. Lai, who nods subtly, holding up a data tablet filled with astronomical information. This conversation has been most illuminating, Elena says, standing to signal its conclusion. I believe Earth and the Crixenar may have much to offer one another. Perhaps, Tixon responds, light pulsing in complex patterns. Remember, Captain Rice, the challenge will test not just skill, but perspective. The hegemony sees the nebula as an obstacle course to be survived. Consider whether it might be something else entirely. As Elena leaves the meeting chamber, her communicator chimes. Admiral Zolthar requests her presence on the hegemony flagship immediately. The challenge of Caridian is about to be formally proposed. Just as Tixon predicted, she murmurs, straightening her uniform. Let's see how the Admiral handles another surprise. And find out everything you can about this nebula, she adds. I want to know exactly what kind of impossible we're dealing with this time. Elena sends a secure message to her senior staff, scheduling an emergency briefing in 4 hours. As she prepares for her meeting with Admiral Zolthar, Dr. Lee forwards her preliminary analysis of the Caridian Nebula based on the Crixenar data. The nebula's properties are unlike anything in Earth's astronomical records, a region where normal physics applies only intermittently, where radiation exists in spectrums humans had only theorized about, where gravitational forces shift unpredictably. According to hegemony records, 62% of challenge participants never returned. The rest emerged with significant damage to their vessels and psyches. When Elena arrives at the hegemony flagship's ceremonial hall, she finds it transformed. Where previously the space had been arranged for diplomatic functions, now it resembles an ancient arena. Representatives from dozens of species sit in concentric rings around a central platform. Admiral Zolthar stands at its center, resplendent in ceremonial battle armor that gleams with an otherworldly iridescence. Captain Elena Reyes of Earth, the Admiral announces as she approaches. The Council remains divided regarding your species' potential. Some see promise, others see threat. All agree that traditional protocols have been insufficient. In your case, Elena ascends to the platform, acutely aware of the hundreds of alien eyes tracking her movement. Unlike the Admiral in his ornate armor, she wears her standard uniform, practical, unadorned, designed for function rather than ceremony. Therefore, Zolthar continues, I invoke the Caridian Challenge, a tradition older than many civilizations represented here. One pilot, one vessel. The nebula's heart contains an ancient beacon. Reach it and return with its signature frequency to demonstrate your worthiness. A holographic representation of the nebula appears between them, swirling gases obscuring whatever lies at its center. The display shows the treacherous path through radiation storms and gravitational anomalies. The challenge must be accepted voluntarily, Zolthar explains, his voice carrying the weight of ancient tradition. Refusal is permitted, though it would suggest your species recognizes its limitations, a wisdom the Council would respect. Elena studies the hologram, noting how the display emphasizes certain hazards while minimizing others. The Crixenar data had highlighted different dangers entirely. The nebula shown here seems designed to intimidate rather than inform. And if we succeed? Elena asks, deliberately using the plural we, rather than accepting the individual framework the Admiral attempts to impose. Zolthar's compound eyes shift through colors suggesting amusement. In 12 millennia, no emergent species has completed the challenge successfully. Most consider survival itself a victory. That doesn't answer my question, Admiral. A ripple of murmurs passes through the assembly at her directness. Zolfar's posture stiffens almost imperceptibly. Should an emergent species ever complete the challenge, he states formally, the Council would recognize their potential for eventual partnership rather than vassalage. But such hypotheticals hardly warrant. Earth accepts the challenge. Alina interrupts, triggering another wave of murmurs at this breach of protocol. The Admiral's breathing apparatus hisses, a sign of surprise. He had expected hesitation, negotiation, perhaps fear. You understand the dangers involved. The nebula does not forgive errors in judgment or execution. Neither does Earth's history, Alina replies evenly. We've been forged by challenges that seemed impossible until we overcame them. Zolfar studies her with newfound intensity. Your confidence is unusual. The hegemony's champion, Vex Mor, has trained for this challenge his entire existence. His genetic structure was optimized specifically for nebula navigation. Alina smiles slightly. We prefer to optimize through experience rather than genetics. Speaking of which, I'd like to introduce Earth's pilot for the challenge. She activates her communicator. Lieutenant Suarez, please join us. Minutes later, Diego enters the ceremonial hall. His appearance draws confused reactions from the assembled dignitaries. Where Vex Mor stands tall, sleek, and optimized, Diego looks ordinary. A human of average height with the weathered face of someone who has spent years in harsh conditions. The radiation burns on his neck and forearms tell their own story of survival. This is your champion? Vex Mor asks, bioluminescent patterns suggesting disbelief or possibly amusement. This, Alina responds proudly, is Lieutenant Diego Suarez, survivor of the Kuiper Belt collapse, veteran of 17 impossible rescues, and the best pilot humanity has ever produced. Diego nods politely to the assembled aliens, seemingly unimpressed by the grandeur surrounding him. When do we start? When Diego's vessel finally emerges, scorched but intact, the elapsed time shows on every display. 17 minutes and 22 seconds, less than half the previous record set 3,000 years earlier. As Diego opens his cockpit, wiping sweat from his ordinary human face, he holds up a small data crystal. Got your frequency signature, he says casually. Also mapped some interesting mineral deposits near the center. Figured they might be useful. The silence that follows feels eternal. Admiral Zolfar approaches the monitoring station, compound eyes shifting rapidly through colors indicating disbelief. He examines the timing verification, the flight path recording, and the beacon signature, all authentic, all impossible by hegemony understanding. How? The question escapes before the Admiral can maintain his ceremonial composure. Diego shrugs, climbing down from his scorched vessel. Close up, the craft looks even more primitive. Heat shields partially melted, navigation array held together with what appears to be emergency sealant, maneuvering fins manually adjusted with mechanical tools rather than precision manufacturing. The nebula's not actually that difficult to navigate, Diego explains, stretching his shoulders after the intense flight. You just have to stop fighting it. Alina steps forward, pride evident in her expression. Lieutenant Suarez specializes in working with environmental hazards rather than against them. Impossible, Vex Mor interjects, his bioluminescent patterns displaying agitation. The radiation levels alone should have disrupted your navigation systems. Diego nods. They did. About 3 minutes in, everything electronic went haywire. Had to fly manual after that. Manual navigation. Through quantum flux zones. A hegemony scientist exclaims. The calculations alone would require. No calculations. Diego interrupts. Just feel. The nebula has patterns, not regular ones, but patterns nonetheless, like flying through a storm back on Earth. You don't calculate a storm, you sense its rhythms. Dr. Wong examines Diego's vessel, pointing out modifications to Captain Reyes. Look at these improvised radiation baffles. He reconfigured them mid-flight using the emergency kit. And this, He indicates a cracked panel with astonishment. He vented atmosphere through a hull breach to create additional maneuvering thrust. The hegemony technical specialists cluster around the small craft, their disbelief giving way to intense curiosity. One runs a scanner over the cockpit controls, simple mechanical levers and wheels alongside now defunct electronic systems. You navigated the most dangerous region in the sector. With these, the specialist asks incredulously. Diego smiles slightly. Sometimes simpler is better. Electronics fail. Instincts don't. Elena watches the growing crowd of alien scientists examining the vessel, noting how their initial dismissal has transformed into fascination. Even Admiral Zolfar studies the craft with new intensity, his posture less rigid than before. Dr. Patel approaches Elena, speaking quietly. Captain, the Krixnar representative is requesting permission to speak with Lieutenant Suarez privately. They seem quite excited. At least, their light patterns suggest extreme agitation. Arrange it, Elena nods, and have Dr. Lai prepare a complete analysis of the data Diego collected. I suspect it contains more than just the beacon signature. As if reading her thoughts, Diego approaches, handing her not one but 3 data crystals. The blue one's the beacon signature they wanted, he explains quietly. The red one contains readings on some unusual energy patterns at the nebula's core, not natural formations. And the green one. He hesitates. Well, I'm not entirely sure what it is, but something or someone in there was scanning my ship. Not hostile, just curious. Elena's eyes widen slightly. Something lives in the nebula. Diego shrugs. Can't say for certain. But whatever it was, it helped guide me through a particularly nasty radiation storm. Felt almost like a handshake. Before Elena can respond, Admiral Zolfar approaches, his ceremonial staff now held at a less formal angle. The Council requests your presence, Captain Reyes, he states, his translator conveying a complex mix of emotions. It seems we must reconsider certain assumptions about your species. Elena nods respectfully. We look forward to the conversation, Admiral. Humanity has a long history of exceeding expectations, especially our own. As they walk toward the council chamber, Diego is surrounded by hegemony pilots seeking insights into his techniques. For the first time since contact, the aliens' formal protocols have given way to genuine curiosity. You know, Diego tells an especially persistent Siltar pilot, I could teach you the basics if you're interested. It's not really that complicated once you stop overthinking it. The Council is suspicious until the humans reveal their final surprise. Dr. Wong presents data showing that the galaxy is entering a cycle of increased stellar instability that the hegemony sensors haven't detected. Humanity's desperate fight for survival on Earth led them to develop highly sensitive astronomical monitoring systems. Without adaptation and innovation, countless worlds will face destruction in the coming centuries. Our preliminary models predict 17 hegemony worlds will become uninhabitable within the next 300 years. Dr. Wong explains, his holographic display showing star systems in varying states of projected instability. Another 42 worlds will face severe climate shifts requiring significant adaptation measures. Senior Counselor Vexland of the Vorathi examines the data with growing concern. These projections conflict with established models maintained for 8,000 years. Because your models were designed to confirm stability, not detect disruption, Dr. Lai interjects gently. Earth's survival has depended on anticipating catastrophe before it occurs. Elena watches the council members exchanging glances, their rigid hierarchy temporarily forgotten in the face of this existential information. Admiral Zolfar, surprisingly, appears less resistant than others. The human pilot's observations within the nebula. The Admiral notes, they correlate with these projections. Energy patterns consistent with stellar destabilization. Precisely, Elena confirms. Lieutenant Suarez wasn't sent into the nebula merely to pass your test. We suspected the nebula's unique properties might provide early confirmation of our models. She turns to address the entire council. What you call a challenge, we saw as an opportunity to gather crucial data. A crystalline, Krix-Nar representative, not Tixon, but another of their kind, pulses with complex light patterns. The humans approached the nebula differently than all previous challengers, not as an obstacle to overcome, but as a source of knowledge. This observation triggers murmurs throughout the council chamber. The distinction strikes at the heart of the philosophical divide between human and hegemony approaches. For 12,000 years, Alina continues, the hegemony has maintained stability by controlling change. Earth has survived by embracing it. Both approaches have merit, but the coming stellar changes will require something new, controlled adaptation. She gestures to her senior staff, who activate a complex holographic display showing proposed collaborative projects, joint research initiatives, adaptation technologies, and most significantly, a redesigned nebula navigation protocol that combines hegemony precision with human intuition. We propose the formation of the Galactic Cooperative, Alina states formally, not to replace the hegemony, but to complement it. Where the hegemony excels at maintaining stability, the cooperative would specialize in managing necessary change. Admiral Zolfar studies the proposal, his compound eyes shifting through colors suggesting deep consideration. You offer partnership rather than seeking dominance, despite demonstrating superior capabilities in certain domains. Superior in some areas, inferior in many others, Alina corrects diplomatically. Earth's history is filled with civilizations that conquered rather than cooperated. Few lasted. We've learned from those mistakes. The council chamber falls silent as members process this perspective. For species accustomed to rigid hierarchies of dominance and submission, the concept of collaborative strength represents a fundamental paradigm shift. Finally, Elder Tixon of the Krix-Nar moves to the chamber's center, crystalline structure glowing with formal significance. 17,000 years ago, when the Krix-Nar first encountered other spacefaring species, we faced a similar choice: to dominate with our advanced technology, or to share knowledge through cooperation. We chose the latter, helping form what eventually became the hegemony. The ancient being turned slowly, addressing the entire council. Perhaps it is time for another evolution in our collective approach. The humans offer not submission or domination, but adaptation, the very quality that allowed their representative to navigate the Caridian Nebula through intuition when precision failed. Admiral Zolfar steps forward, standing beside Alina in a gesture unprecedented in hegemony protocol. The human vessels confronted our fleet and laughed. Not from disrespect, I now understand, but from a perspective we had forgotten. That challenges can be opportunities, that the unknown need not be feared. He turns to face Alina directly. Captain Rice, the Hegemony Council requires time to consider your proposal. But speaking for the Defense Directorate, I support opening formal discussions regarding this galactic cooperative. As the council session concludes, humans and aliens begin mixing more freely, exchanging ideas with growing enthusiasm. Diego finds himself surrounded by young pilots eager to learn his nebula navigation techniques, while Dr. Wong and hegemony engineers compared notes on dry technology. Alina observes this spontaneous collaboration with satisfaction. First contact is always a gamble, she tells Admiral Zolfar. When we laughed during our initial meeting, it wasn't mockery. It was recognition of cosmic absurdity. Cosmic absurdity. The Admiral inquires, the concept clearly unfamiliar. Alina smiles. The understanding that in an infinite universe, taking ourselves too seriously may be the greatest error of all.